Welcome to the England Pod, England Squad Predictor. This is going to be what we think would be the England squad if Thomas Tuchel had to select 23 players right now. That's Dave Walker, George Ellick and myself, Ali Maxwell. What's important to say is this is not the squad that we want necessarily. This is going to be based on research and some instinct and some guessing what we think the England squad would be right now. Let's start in nets, where he called up 4 goalkeepers for his 23-man squad. He called up Pickford, who played both games, Henderson, Ramsdale and Trafford. George, do you have any stance on, or do you have any inkling of whether he'll go back to 3 or whether he'll keep going with this group?
Yeah, I've spoken to Thomas. He said he's going, nah, I don't know. My assumption is surely that he goes to 3, and that must have just been, there are 4 obvious keepers here. I want to take a look at all 4 of them.
Maybe he goes to
surely,
5.
Yeah, or 2. 2's enough. Yeah, I reckon 3.
Yeah, I agree. I think it would be very surprising to see him pick 4 again. He basically sort of explained last time that, look, we wanted to pick 4. Those are the top 4 at the moment. I want to see them. I want the coaching staff to see them, and we'll take it from there. I think it will be Pickford, Henderson and Trafford. I think that would be quite an easy decision to make at the moment, given that Ramsdale has just been relegated for the 3rd time in his career. Not that that's necessarily all his fault. Like, you're a goalkeeper, you're kind of hostage to fortune a little bit with the players you've got in front of you, and he's playing in a near historically bad Southampton team. So, you know, a bit of sympathy for him perhaps, but I think it would make sense if you were to pick Pickford, who is obviously the undisputed number 1, Dean Henderson, who's had a good season with Crystal Palace, who've had a good season, who've just got through to the FA Cup final, and James Trafford, who, as you talked about this week on Not the Top 20, in your eyes, is the Championship Player of the Season and was nominated for the Championship Player of the Season at the EFL Awards and has had an incredible season for Burnley, who are now promoted back to the Premier League. I think it will be Pickford, Henderson and Trafford.
Yeah, he is carrying himself and playing like a future England goalkeeper. I know he's been involved previously, and I know that those who watch the Premier League mainly have bad memories of watching James Trafford play for a very poor Burnley team where he got exposed a lot and didn't necessarily show a great version of himself. If you haven't watched the Championship this season, just know that his team, and therefore he, has conceded 15 goals in 45 matches, kept 30 clean sheets, has an 85% save percentage, which is the highest save percentage I've ever seen in any league statistically for a goalkeeper that's played basically a full season. He is so far and away the best shot stopper in the Championship that he is full of confidence right now.
With Pickford, I feel like he's completely bulletproof and impervious to being affected by Everton's sort of annual travails that they always seem to have, you know, for always seemingly in a bit of relegation trouble and always get out of it, but they change a lot of managers. They've had some bad moments in the last however many years, but he was Southgate's number 1 the whole way through. He's so far been Tuchel's number 1 in the first 2 games, but even when Everton are bad, you never really see anyone pointing the fingers at Pickford. You never really think of calamitous moments that he has. Yes, he has his sort of moments where he can be a bit headstrong and he's a big character, but I think that's a strength for him. But he just seems like he's going to continue to be the number 1 unless Trafford can get up to the Premier League next season, and there has been talk that maybe Trafford could move on from Burnley. There's been some speculation that he might even be a target for Newcastle. So if he was to move up a level and play for a top-end Premier League team, then maybe he really would be breathing down Pickford's neck. But Henderson, I think he's someone that we dismissed slightly a little bit on our first squad pod that we did before Tuchel picked his squad. A lot of Palace fans were getting in touch saying, hey, hang on a minute, Henderson's had a really good season for us.
I made a mistake there. I just made a mistake. There's no two ways about it.
But, you know, so he has played for England before. He's been capped before, but he will want to be trying to get back in there. And before we move on from the goalkeepers, I did a bit of research today, and because I was thinking in my mind, right, I was thinking, if you're going to give a goalkeeper a debut, you do it in a June friendly, right? You do it in these, if this is the time of year to get third choice goalkeepers to get them off the mark and get them playing. So I had a look back through every England goalkeeper since David Seaman made his debut in 1988. There have been 23 goalkeepers played for England since then, and I was sort of trying to see if I could see any patterns. Is it common that goalkeepers get their debuts in June? Not that common. Seven of 23 have been given their debuts in June friendlies. What did stick out to me?
That's loads. That's loads. That's a weird amount.
Well, more
12 months, you know.
More have had their debuts in November, weirdly, than June. But yeah, it's not insignificant. I don't think. But what
I guess
did
November,
stick out,
it's probably off the back of a few good months to start the season. You get brought in.
Yeah. But what did stick out at me is that of those 23 goalkeepers, only one of them has made their debut in a competitive match, and that was Aaron Ramsdale in England's 10-0 win against San Marino. He played, that was his first start. But every other England goalkeeper, going actually way back before Seaman, the last England goalkeeper to make their debut in a competitive match was Ray Clements in 1972.
Remember it well.
In a World Cup qualifier against Wales. So that would suggest that James Trafford is not going to play against Andorra, but he does have a chance, perhaps, of playing against Senegal at the City Ground. There are a lot of half-time substitutions as well for goalkeepers coming on for the second half or starting, coming on at half-time. I could see a scenario where Tuchel gives Henderson and Trafford half each at the City Ground.
You took us on a real journey there, because there was a point where I thought you were going to do that thing where you've done some research that took you a while, and even though it hadn't chucked up anything interesting, you were still going to make sure we knew you had done it. And then you just saved an incredible nugget for last. That is remarkable. What a trend that is. Well done you. Just to tie a bow in the Trafford chat, we wouldn't be England under 21s observers and fans if I didn't point out that Trafford is still eligible for the 21s. Not only that, he's already won a Euros with the under 21s. They have a Euros this summer in June where he could get quite a few more games under his belt if Tuchel decides that that's a better place for him. And although he hasn't been involved with the under-21s too much recently, probably their weakest area of the pitch is in goal, and Trafford would be a huge upgrade on the three that were in the squad last time out. So that is a space to watch as well. It might just be that England and the FA and Tuchel and Carsley decide that best place for Trafford to be in June is in Slovakia. Okay, Dave, so we were quite defender-heavy in Tuchel's first squad, particularly with centre-backs, and we had a few absences as well in terms of Trent and Stones. So as best you can, tell me who'd be in the England squad if Tuchel announced it now in the full-back and centre-back positions.
Again, I think the Club World Cup could affect this. If we are to imagine a world where Chelsea and Manchester City players aren't in this squad, which we don't know at all, but let's just pretend for a second that they won't be, that would get rid of Reece James, that would get rid of Levi Colwill, and that would mean John Stones wouldn't come back into the squad if he was fit enough to do so. So on that basis, the players I expect to remain in the squad from last time are Kyle Walker, who had a bit of an elbow injury that kept him out for a few weeks, but is now back in the team at AC Milan. 95 caps. I think he'll be fully focused on trying to get to that 100 cap mark as soon as he can, and this is an easy chance to get a couple away. Tino Livramento, Mark Gahey, Ezri Konsa, Dan Burn, and Miles Lewis-Skelly. That's 6 defenders. So it could go one or two ways here. We could have Colwill and Reece James in the squad, and they could go to the Club World Cup, and that's not a problem. So that would take you up to 8. The other question mark is Trent Alexander-Arnold. Does he come straight back in? He's fit, so you'd expect him to. He's obviously going to be a senior player for Tuchel. You'd obviously expect him to try and get him in there at his first available opportunity. But does the Real Madrid situation complicate matters? FIFA announced that there will be a special transfer window in June, from the 1st and the 10th of June, before the Club World Cup, of which England's 2 games are slap bang in the middle of that window. Are Real Madrid going to try and get him sign up before the Club World Cup, or are they going to kick the can down the road? I don't know, but it feels like there could be a bit of noise around Trent still at that time, but I do expect him to be in the squad.
And you expect Dan Burn to be in the squad. I kind of feel like for some, Burn would be that guy that was called up to a squad around the time that he was having famously what a fortnight, by the way, which became what a month, by the way, which might become what a quarter, by the way, Dave.
What a career!
You reckon he'll stay in?
Yeah.
But you're binning off Jarell Kwanzaa, who obviously we didn't see take to the field in the previous games.
Yeah, well, Kwanzaa is an interesting one. Just played so little football this season. So I was quite surprised to see him in the squad, but then he didn't even get on the pitch when he was in the squad, and he only made the matchday squad for one of the 2 games in the last camp. So, I'm puzzled by his inclusion. He's another player that would be eligible for the under-21s as well if they want to go down that route. But Dan Burn, I think because Tuchel praised him so much for his leadership qualities, and so did the other players as well, I wouldn't expect it to be a one and done for him. I think he'll be part of that group moving forward.
We've got Kyle Walker, Tino Livramento and Miles Lewis-Skelly as the fullbacks. Obviously, Tino can play both sides, has been playing off the left for Newcastle. And Gahey, Konza and Byrne as your locks for the centre-backs.
Yeah, and add in Trent, I think.
We'll get Trent in there as well. Okay, that makes sense. Feels a little light on central defenders, but I suppose Kyle Walker might say, you know what? If it means getting an appearance, I'll happily come on and play centre-back if need be. And in the interest of making sure we don't miss out any names, the England pool of potential squad members is always pretty large. You've also got Ben White as part of the conversation, who's not played a huge amount of football for Arsenal. Jed Spence had a little bit of clamour at some point, which appears to have died down a little bit. On the left side, Luke Shaw is back and played 90 for Manchester United in their last game. Lewis Hall's still injured. Tyreek Mitchell's obviously had a strong season but was overlooked for the last squad. Nico O'Reilly is a new name, first mentioned on the England pod, has obviously been playing and starring in some ways for Manchester City recently, very young player. Brentford fans would want Lewis Potter to have a mention. Leif Davis of Ipswich. I feel like we're getting down the depth chart a bit too deep here. Rico Henry, even Ryan Sessegnon. But there's fans, aren't there? Fulham fans, Brentford fans, Ipswich fans, who'll be looking at a camp like this, and it's not out the realms of possibility that you get a bit of a random debutant.
Yeah, I don't think so, though. I'd be surprised if any of those names got in there. I mean, I think the one name that we haven't mentioned that we probably should is Harry Maguire, who is back in the Manchester United team. And, put aside his sort of couple of spells where he's had 10 minutes up front. I know he got that goal in the last minute against Lyon. But just in terms of him being back in the team, even if he doesn't get in the squad, I think it will be interesting to see if Tuchel gets asked about him in the press conference, and in this same mould as, look, you brought Jordan Henderson back in your last squad and you talked about his leadership qualities and how important he is to the group. Well, Harry Maguire's fit now and he was basically part of that same leadership group with Henderson and others for the Southgate years. Have you thought about him? Have you spoken to him? Is he in your thoughts? So I'll be interested to see what Tuchel would say about that.
Talking of Jordan Henderson, George, in the deep midfield areas, we had Rice, Jones and Henderson. How do you reckon it will look in June?
Rice, Jones and Henderson. I think it's obviously Declan Rice is an absolute lock in terms of if he's fit, then he is one of these players that will play every minute that he possibly can for England, and rightly so. He's the one player who's probably in the best form of anyone in the England squad right now. And yeah, I mean, he is a proper, he's alongside Kane, he's alongside, well, I mean, who else is there? Bellingham, in terms of being, if he's fit and available, he plays. I'd be amazed if Jones came out of the squad. He played in both games under Tuchel in the last squad. He's had a very good season. He may not be a key player for Liverpool, but he plays a lot of minutes for the team that just won the Premier League. He's still developing, and I think his versatility and his ability on the ball fits pretty well into the system and style that Tuchel wants to play. And with Henderson, would I pick him? No, but we know that Thomas Tuchel really values him. We know that he values him as a leader and as someone who he can rely on. I thought he looked okay and pretty tidy when he came on, as he always is. There's this relationship between him and Bellingham that seems to be incredibly important to Bellingham, and the perception is that if Henderson's around, Bellingham's a happier guy. I think Wharton and Mainu should be in the conversation. My perception is that Wharton will go to the under-21 Euros. With Mainu, my guess is he'll either go to the under-21 Euros or possibly even more likely just won't feature for England this summer. Mm-hmm. He's not playing particularly well for Manchester United. He's been in and out of the side. He's had injury problems. He hasn't been able to nail down that deeper midfield role as his position in the United side. He's been playing more advanced, and realistically, if he's going to be a number 10 in the current England setup, there just isn't room for him at all right now. And also, given he's had a crazy 18 months or so, like he's another one that could probably do with just being taken out and given a bit of time to reflect and to refresh himself ahead of next season.
I think Conor Gallagher is worth a mention. I mean,
playing left wing.
Playing left midfield, isn't he, for Simeone at Atletico Madrid. They are going to the Club World Cup as well. He wasn't in the squad in March. He was fit and available for that. So that would be a new addition. Angel Gomez, not fit, still injured, not available, having looked pretty good in those deeper midfield roles under Carsley. Elliot Anderson is a notable name, given that Nottingham Forest are hosting the game against Senegal, and we discussed the potential for a Forest player, not named Morgan Gibbs-White, to maybe be given a debut in front of their adoring home faithful. And then there's Lewis Cook.
But he's another one who's eligible for the under-21s too. So
true, was in the last squad. And then there's Lewis Cook, who kind of, there's a certain chunk of Premier League observers, and they're not all Bournemouth fans, who always bring up Lewis Cook and are quite offended that he's almost never seemingly been seriously considered, mid to long term as an England option, but always like to point out that he is an English central, deep midfielder who can play, who has had lots of injury problems, but in recent years has not just looked fit, but played for one of the most intense pressing managers in the country in Iraola.
He's got a cap as well.
He has got a cap as well.
He played against Italy in a friendly in March 2018, and if I remember rightly, he was on standby for the World Cup that year.
There you go.
Played quite a lot of minutes this season at right back for Bournemouth as well.
Versatile.
But I can't see a world, and this is probably now going to get clipped up when he's in. I'd be amazed if he got into the squad given the potential.
Well, if you want to be clipped up, can you say, I'd be amazed if Lewis Cook was involved in this England squad?
I'd be amazed if Lewis Cook got a call up to the England squad this summer. And that's no slight on him. He's a player that, I like to watch. He fits into the 4-2-3-1 as well as being one of the two deep midfielders, as we say, versatile, but it doesn't really feel like he's on a radar as it stands. And I think there are players, when we talk about Bellingham as being one of the players who we obviously put into that attacking midfield category. Well, in one of the games that Thomas Tuchel's taken charge of, one of the two games, Bellingham started alongside Rice as a deep midfielder. So you've almost got another option there.
I want to see the radar. That's what I want to see. We talked about this last time when Tuchel apparently has his list of 50 English players who were in his thoughts. I really want to see that, because of all the names, I don't know, by the end of this pod and the one before, we will have mentioned probably more than 50 players, I should imagine. And there'll be some who might be really close and Tuchel might really like. There might be some where he's just like, never in a million years, you're not in my thoughts. I would love to see that long list and, just get some insight into his thought process. I'm always interested in that, because it seems like it's quite a fun thing for us to do, to pick your squad and to think about who could play where. But when you actually have to do it, there's so many considerations that have to be thought about when you're picking squads, especially in the pressure of a major tournament. This one's a little bit different, but I wonder who is on that radar of his.
In central attacking midfield areas, George, obviously, Jude, if available, if no Club World Cup restrictions, etc., will be in the squad. If his shoulder's all right and he's not having surgery on that, which feels like he'll never have any time off to have surgery on anything, because he just plays and plays and plays and plays. But as you mentioned, against Latvia, we had Rodgers and Bellingham basically playing as two, depends what you want to call them, very attacking number 8s or two number 10s, basically. Do you have Rodgers in there in this area of the pitch, and who else?
So I think it'll be Bellingham, Rodgers, Foden, with Gibbs-White being a possible, if we've got room for him at the end. There are kind of two things I want to mention here. First is that I'm sure Foden will be selected, but it's getting to the point now where I'm not entirely sure that he should be. This is a guy who won PFA Player of the Year last season in the Premier League, whose talent is incredibly obvious to anyone who's ever watched him play football, who's been disappointing for England for the most part, albeit there were a couple of moments last summer where he was disappointing but out of position, where the disallowed goal, the shot in the semi that hit the woodwork, he was he was the one player that was kind of stripped of his big moment where others had theirs who probably weren't much better than him over the course of the tournament. But he's just looked a shadow of himself this season for City, and on merit, he doesn't deserve to be in the squad, I don't think, for his international performances or his club performances. And there comes a time where I think England have to work out, like, is he going to be a player? And there have been players in the past who've done it for their clubs and struggled for the countries, where we have to work out a future if Phil Foden isn't going to be the player that we hoped he's going to be. Now, it's Thomas Tuchel's job, of course, to make sure that he is. But if we're selecting squads on pure merit, then I think that you have to call into question whether or not Foden deserves to be in. The benefit for him is that there are very few players who are actually in form in his position. Like, that's, it's not like you've got, as was the case last summer, Cole Palmer banging down the door to get in ahead of him. It's not like Morgan Gibbs-White is in the form of his career right now, albeit playing for a club who are doing very well. They're two games that are pretty inconsequential, and no England career is going to be made or destroyed against Andorra and Senegal. But there comes a point soon where Foden's got to show it. Otherwise, I think Tuchel's going to have him as a name that was once an absolute shoo-in for selection, to one that you've got to call into question if you want him to be, even in the squad in a major tournament, let alone in the starting 11, unless he improves.
Okay, so midfield areas, we've got Rice, Jones and Henderson, same as March. We've got Bellingham, Rodgers and Foden, also the same as March. In the wide forward roles, I think that Bukayo Saka will, without a doubt, all being well, with his fitness, be in this England squad, and I cannot wait to see Bukayo Saka playing for Thomas Tuchel's England. Off the right in the March friendlies, we saw Foden have a tough game against Albania. We saw Bowen have a fairly quiet game off the right hand side. Actually ended up swapping, didn't he, with Rashford against Latvia. Saka is one of our star players. He's one of the best players in the world, and Arsenal don't have Club World Cup duty. They might have a Champions League final 1 week before, and I'm sure Arteta will absolutely hate the idea of Saka going and playing for England within a week of that, rather than resting up for the summer. But I think that all being normal, Saka is without a doubt going to be in the England squad. And also on the right, as his backup, as I would see it, I think it's tempting to spin the wheel, roll the dice. You want to see new players, and I'll mention Jacob Murphy in a second. But I think Bowen will keep his spot. It's his spot to lose. He's an incumbent in the squad. He didn't have an amazing game against Latvia, but he didn't have a terrible game either. I think what's worth pointing out with Bowen is that he has generally performed well for England. He offers something a little bit different to Saka, which there's an argument is kind of what you want if you're going to have a backup to Saka, rather than just a less good version of that same player. And he's been playing for a West Ham team that are currently one of the Premier League's crisis clubs. There always has to be one or two, and at the moment that it's West Ham who are in that situation. But Bowen's been brilliant, even with West Ham being poor. Whether it's from a statistical standpoint, where 9 goals and 7 assists for the 17th Premier League team is a seriously impressive return. Whether it's the fact that he continues to lead them as captain, there's no issues around summer plans or him not being up for it. I expect Bowen to be in the squad. If he isn't, I think there's a chance that Jacob Murphy could make it, based on not just his recent form for Newcastle, but the sort of player that he is. So direct, really speedy across short distances, great delivery with both feet. As I'm talking, I'm thinking I would actually really like to see Jacob Murphy, and I wouldn't necessarily see it as just like a little gift for a couple of months of good form. I think there'd be more to it than that. I think the type of player that he is fits what Tuchel wants. Output from his wide players, delivery and directness and speed. And the fact that he's 30, I don't know why that needs to matter for Tuchel and for England when he'll be 31 when we play in the World Cup. Maybe 32, I don't know exactly when his birthday is. And that's fine. We don't need him to be 22 years old. Like, we're here to win now. So I'd quite like to see Murphy. I'll leave him off for the moment. We'll see if there's space for him after this.
He was born in February 1995, Jacob Murphy.
So he'll be 31.
When was Josh Murphy born?
Yeah, on the left side, I've got Marcus Rashford. It was not long before we started recording that David Ornstein reported that he's got an injury. He's not having surgery on it. He might be back for some of Villa's end of the season games, but he's certainly gunning for June international. He's in a great position to re-establish himself here, and I think he will do everything he can to be available. I think the way that Tuchel managed him in March with his call-up and 2 starts means that he owes something to Tuchel, and I expect if he's fit, he'll still be called up. And then Eze, who had a great cameo and goal against Latvia, seems to fit what Tuchel wants in the position, is actually in much better club form than he was before the last camp, and has had some starring moments, particularly in the last few weeks, is super confident and is getting towards approaching kind of almost star status, rather than like exciting player that we like watching for a mid-table Premier League club status, and that's really exciting. So I think it'll be Rashford and Eze. If not, you've got Anthony Gordon, who's been involved in many squads and was called up, got injured and hasn't started a game for Newcastle since he's been back. I still think he's probably above Harvey Barnes in the pecking order, even though Barnes is now playing in his spot in the Newcastle team. Then there's Hudson-Odoi, as mentioned, who could be an interesting call-up from a Nottingham point of view. Jacob Ramsey was name-checked by Thomas Tuchel as someone that he felt, only just missed out of the last squad. Sancho and Sterling, I don't feel are likely to be called up. I don't think they're exactly the right profile for Tuchel, and I kind of think at the moment their England race is run. Is that the case for Jack Grealish? For me, I think it's unlikely that we see him in June, but George, there are some lobbyists who are pro-Jack Grealish at this stage.
Well, I'm always pro Jack Grealish. Obviously, from a club perspective, it's not been a good season again. You could defend the season running into the Euros because he was injured for much of it, but he has struggled to break into a poor Manchester City side all campaign. When he has played, he hasn't really impacted games that well, and it seems pretty likely to me that his Manchester City career is coming to an end. But to throw some words back in your face, Ali, you mentioned earlier that we shouldn't necessarily judge players' club form too harshly when it comes to internationals. And the fact remains in my mind that Jack Grealish, when he plays for England, has been incredibly impressive. He was brought back into the fold by Lee Carsley in the interim spell. He scored and was very good against Ireland. He scored and was very good against Finland. He played, I think, 2 90s and the majority of the other game too, and was a massive bright spark for England in a period where he still wasn't playing particularly well for Manchester City. And for England, he still looks to me like, you watch Grealish now for City and you think, where has that player gone? And you watch Jack Grealish play for England and that player is still there, where he's encouraged to take players on and be direct and be positive rather than being a player who just retains possession. And at a time where, as we mentioned, Gibbs-White, Foden, Palmer are all basically out of form, and with Jack Grealish having played with some success as a number 10 and even as a actual central midfielder for Manchester City in recent weeks, Thomas Tuchel came out after not selecting him for the last squad and basically kept the door very much open and said he's a player that he's looking forward to working with. I think it's a matter of time as to when he's called into a Tuchel squad rather than if. Maybe Tuchel wants him to get a move this summer and start playing football consistently in the Premier League again, or a top league in order to get in. But it would seem crazy to me for us not to, at some point between now and the end of the year, give Grealish an opportunity to show what he can do in an England shirt for Tuchel, given that he has consistently been a massive bright spark for us whenever he does play.
You've charmed me, to be fair. You've charmed me there. After 10 years of doing this together, I thought I was immune to your charms, but apparently not when it comes to lovely Jack Grealish. Up top, I think that Kane will be in the squad again, all being well with the Club World Cup, which starts not long after this. All being well, it'd be astounding if not. He will be someone that has won a major trophy in his football career, which is something that's been missing for him. And I'm looking forward to seeing what that does for him. He's also the Bundesliga's top goal scorer, and Tuchel clearly wants him to be England's striker up until at least the end of the World Cup. I think that's pretty clear. Watkins is not having his best month or two. He lost his spot to Rashford, who is now injured. So I think we'd expect to see Watkins finish the season and hopefully finish it strong, starting games as Aston Villa's number 9. He wasn't in the March squad because he was absent through injury, so there is a question mark as to whether what Solanke did in training impressed Tuchel and nudged him above Watkins in the pecking order. I think that because of the goal against the Netherlands in particular, that Watkins is still in my eyes above Solanke in that England pecking order, but Tuchel went for 2 strikers and seemingly happy with that, given that he doesn't really want to rotate Kane out. So it'll be interesting to see whether he goes for Kane, Watkins and Solanke, or whether it's just Kane and Watkins. For the purpose of our squad, I'm going to go with just Kane and Watkins for right now. That means that we've got 22 players in our squad, which leaves us open for a wild card. At the moment, we've got Pickford, Henderson, Trafford, Kyle Walker, Tino Livramento, Miles Lewis-Skelly and Trent Alexander-Arnold as fullbacks, Mark Gahey, Ezri Konsa and Dan Burn as centre-backs. In midfield, Declan Rice, Curtis Jones and Jordan Henderson. Attacking midfielders, Jude Bellingham, Morgan Rogers, Phil Foden, and wide players, Bukayo Saka, Ebere Eze, Marcus Rashford and Jared Bowen. And up top, Harry Kane and Ollie Watkins. As I look at it as a whole, I'm thinking we might be a little light in the central defensive area, even if I'd like a wild card to be a bit more exciting.
I think I have sold us a bit short in that department. Yeah, I think the presence of Trent coming back in, which we expect to happen, does complicate it a little bit. I don't think Colwill and Kwanzaa will be in the squad, and I think if he can pick Reece James and he's fit enough and he's available, I think he would want him in there as well. So do we see Kyle Walker as some sort of like auxiliary covering centre-back if we need him? Or do you think he'll get Colwill or Kwanzaa back in there? I think Kwanzaa probably not. I wouldn't be surprised to see Colwill and James in the squad and he makes room elsewhere, maybe in the striking department, I don't know.
I don't love the idea of Walker being an auxiliary centre-back, and then I think to myself, well, across 2 games, do all 4 centre-backs play? Do they need to play? Well, no, they definitely don't need to, barring injury. And frankly, Gahey, Konsa and Burn could do all the minutes themselves between the 3 of them, with Gahey able to play on the left side. Not a big deal if you lose Burn, the natural left footer, and Konsa on the right side. So, but just in terms of centre-back names, I mean, Maguire is now fit and available. Trevor Chalobah is having a little burst of games for Chelsea and impressing in a poor team at the moment. Tomori is always part of these conversations. Branthwaite as well will have plenty of clamour, understandably, I think, on performances on merit. He's got every right to be in this England squad, but he might be a redirect, shall we say, to Slovakia to play for the England under-21s at the Euros, where he'll be a key player, having played a bench role when they won it 2 years ago. So difficult one, and I don't really know the answer. Maybe for the purposes of this, we leave that and we add a wild card elsewhere, because at the top end of the pitch, we're pretty well set in central midfield, in attacking midfield areas. I just think, is there a space for one of Morgan Gibbs-White or Jacob Murphy? Gibbs-White, obviously, in the squad last time out, albeit not originally called up, was praised by Tuchel, particularly for how he conducted himself, how he trained, and Jacob Murphy is the clamour man.
I think, in order of likelihood, I think Gibbs-White is definitely the most likely, having already been in a group, and with the Forest connection. I think Grealish is more likely than Murphy, because, as I say, Tuchel spoke about him and just said that he wanted to work with him. He's looking forward to working with him, and the door's very much open for him to come in, albeit he hasn't obviously done much at club level. Murphy, I'd love to see it, but I guess if you're thinking about the World Cup and you're picking players who you think are going to make an impact in America next summer, he feels to me maybe the least likely to do that, and therefore would struggle to get in.
Well, good news for the City Ground faithful, who are also England fans, and there's quite a few of those. Morgan Gibbs-White does make the squad and no doubt will make an appearance at the City Ground against Senegal. Our squad, as we perceive it, here at the very end of April, with about a month until Tuchel names his squad for the games against Andorra and Senegal, has Jordan Pickford, Dean Henderson and James Trafford in goal, has Kyle Walker, Tino Livramento, Trent Alexander-Arnold and Miles Lewis-Skelly, the fullbacks, Mark Gahey, Ezri Konsa and Dan Burn at centre-back, with Declan Rice, Curtis Jones and Dean Henderson in the middle of the park, as in March. Jude Bellingham, Morgan Rogers, Phil Foden and Morgan Gibbs-White, they were all in that squad eventually in March as well. Bukayo Saka coming back in the wide areas, but Eze, Rashford and Bowen keeping their spaces in the squad, and Watkins coming in for Solanke to be the Harry Kane understudy. So there you go, that's the England pod squad. What do you think of it? Who have we missed? Who's in that shouldn't be in? Comment on YouTube or on Spotify. If you've liked the video, please do like and subscribe on YouTube. Cheers. Go well.